right, cool. And all right, here we go. Oh wow, this just started by itself. Okay, this is brilliant. Well, Mercury retrograde. Hello and welcome to Unexplained Possibilities Podcast. I'm your host, Melvin the Crimson Taurus. Niema can't be here tonight. She's busy with the boxing match, so hopefully she's whipping some tail. I'm lying, by the way. She does not box. She will get eaten up. She's a twig. But no, she is away, and she'll be back when she's back. However, as you know, if I'm live for a podcast, it's because I have someone with me, and tonight is no exception. Joining us is someone who has a vast amount of knowledge in the occult field, whether it's dealing with the various deities of the world, performing rituals, and even alchemy. He probably knows something about everything. So, is magic as simple as... I can't read my handwriting. Wow. Oh, here we go. Is magic as simple as going bibbity bobbity boo, or is it something more complex that you'll need some type of universal formula to figure out? Hopefully, our guests can tell us. So please welcome to Unexplained Possibilities for the first time, Kurtis Joseph.
Hey, Melvin, what's up, man? Good to be here.
Thank you for joining. It has technology hates us tonight, but it is what it is. We made it.
Yes, we did. Mercury retrograde is always fun for me. It's my ruling planet.
Oh, okay.
And I swear, man, as an author, someone who likes to write, someone who likes to communicate, it seems like it's Mercury retrograde 6 months out of the year. So it makes everything more difficult. So I have to almost do things seasonally, like an athlete.
And hello to everyone who's joining us. Sorry we were a bit late, but thank you for sticking around and popping in here. And Bonnie will, since she's a mod, she'll say hi and take care of those formalities. So, all right, Mercury retrograde. I wasn't going to start with that, but we're starting with it. What the heck is it, and why does it affect us so much?
Well, I mean, a lot of people, especially within left-hand path magic, right? They'll say that their lives are not dictated by the stars. They don't have to follow specific planetary hours in their magic. They don't have to follow moon phases. But we know that scientifically, the moon affects this world, right?
Mm-hmm.
It affects the tides, right? The very word lunatic comes from the symptoms which are brought forth from, lunacy that occurs on the full moon, So if the moon affects the Earth, we should also assume that other planets affect the Earth in different ways as well. And it just so happens that Mercury deals with communication and travel, and being that technology is the modern vehicle for communication, normally during Mercury retrograde, we suffer all kind of technological difficulties,
Yes. Now, it's interesting what you said about the moon, because I do think a lot of people somewhat gloss over that. The moon, as we know, controls the waves of the earth, the water. And what is the human body mostly made of?
Right.
Water. So, to think that the moon, in this case, can't have an effect on us, it's just lunacy. See what I did there?
Yeah.
And I think, to a greater extent, yes, the planets can also have an effect. And I never really thought about it too much, in all honesty, because we were so spread out and far away, the planets between one another. But yeah, there is a real possibility that it affects us at a certain scale, certain times, like he said, unfortunately for you, all the time, Mr. Mercury. And, what can we do to combat that, if anything?
Well, this is where knowledge of the tree of life and the tree of Doth, the tree of knowledge, is helpful. There are specific demons or daemons of the zodiac. And so you can work with such forces in order to close doors that might be open within your life experience, and vice versa. You could also use it to open doors that might be closed, but you can also utilize those sorts of forces in order to take the edge off of certain retrograde planetary movements. However, I mean, honestly, in regard to alchemy and personal transformation, it's really good to usually write it out and learn the lessons that you're supposed to learn. Taking the easy way, this is normally the very first hang up, the very first noose within any initiatory magical system. The temptation to take the easy way, to simply utilize magic to have our wishes granted rather than as a platform for self-transformation. And so you really combat it by understanding your relationship with it. Like me as a Gemini who is ruled by Mercury, we rule communication. We like to talk a lot. So during Mercury retrograde, this is really a time for me to focus on listening. Because if I talk too much, I usually say things that get me into trouble.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's funny.
So I have to learn that about myself, though, right? This is a very basic alchemical principle, simply to know thyself.
Now, the thing is with Gemini, it's funny you mentioned that. A good friend of mine, he's a Gemini. Niema's a Gemini. And I see you guys as having split personalities in the sense of you're kind of like a computer. You learn what you want to learn. And if you're not interested, it just completely goes over your head and it's just like, whatever. And you guys have a dark side to you. And it literally is sometimes like Two-Face. And it's interesting in that regard because one half has all this knowledge. Then you have, I'll call it the mobster half. And it's terrifying thinking, what if the mobster half decides to go a little nuts and use this knowledge against someone? That is scary. But being that you are a Gemini and you communicate, it must be hard trying to relay everything that's going on in your head to communicate. Because sometimes, speaking to someone, it's not easy. And, you always have to watch your tongue. You don't want to come off a certain way, but then sometimes you do want to come off a certain way. Like, how do you manage that? Like, especially with someone in the occult who has all this knowledge, and you might see things that someone is doing that's off, and you want to how do you manage all of that?
For me, it brings me back to this Eastern idea of being present, this idea of no mind. A lot of people would equate no mind with stupidity or ignorance, like lack of intelligence, but really, it actually represents something that transcends thought. Because a lot of time our thought process gets in the way of true knowledge. But when you're completely present and open, receptive, simply observing things as they are, it brings forth true knowledge in a very authentic way. And by being present, you can take your time to pick and choose your words carefully. You see a lot of people within my field, and nothing against anybody, but they go by scripts, man. Their YouTube videos are essentially released as newsletters a week later, and it's not authentic. Nothing I do is edited. It's simply in the moment as it is truth. But you see, the interesting thing about truth is that it can differ moment to moment. It might be true that I need to utilize baneful magic now, but that might not be true as the eternal now expands. So it's about really being in touch with nature as you are being present. The fluid nature of chaos that is all around us. And it's really not about being in opposition to any one thing. It's about creating harmony within those various tensions between relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or relationships in general, just the various feelings, thoughts, and emotions everyone has. And then there's also how your environment affects you. If you're present, you know how to fix your environment to make it more conducive to peace and harmony. It's really not rocket science. It's not as mystical as people make it out to be. Magic is really about, for me, creating harmony in the life experience.
Now, normally this is where I would ask, so how did you get into this? Like, what got you into it? But instead, I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to ask you, what made you a believer in all of this?
Well, my own gifts made me a believer in it. It was like I was brought up as a martial artist. I was thrown into the martial arts at the age of 7. And even though I liked the sport of it all, I liked performing kata and things like that. At a young age, I was exposed to the philosophies, which really acted as the spiritual backbone of it all. And I began to be able to apply these philosophies to my life in order to create harmony. And I also learned to apply those philosophical lessons to become a better martial artist, because I was able to draw the connections between the life experience and combat. Because let's face it, life, it's not a ballroom dance, right? But there came a point in time where I started getting exposed to various religions, Christianity, Zen, and I would go to various services, masses, and people would talk to me, ask me, well, what did you get from this? What did you learn? And my answers would always be very deep, very deep. And adults would look at me like, almost like I was crazy, but at the same time, sort of in awe, like, how can such a young mind grasp these things? It just doesn't make sense. And that is really what started my belief. But it really wasn't about a belief in God. It was belief in myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
The belief in the knowledge that I was able to glean from these various traditions. And that's really what became the nucleus of everything that I do. It wasn't about, through judgment, prejudice, being for or against any one thing. That's not where I got my knowledge. I got my knowledge by understanding that there are common denominators within all spiritual systems and traditions, whether religious or magical. And that's what we really need to understand, that it brings us together. It unites us as one human race. And the various differences in all these traditions are important too, because they're reasons to learn from each other. But these days, it's a reason to divide us, and that's not cool. But the belief really did start with my deeper understanding of,
You see,
very interesting spiritual scriptures. We'll just say that. Yeah.
you're way better than me. When I was a kid, I was looking at Bruce Lee and I just said, I want to do that. I want to punch somebody through a wall. So I wasn't looking at the actual teachings, what the philosophy of Bruce Lee and Jeet Kune Do. Is it do or though? Jeet Kune Do. I always get that word mixed up. And I wasn't looking at that. I was looking at him punch somebody through a wall, and I wanted to be that powerful. It wasn't until I got older where it was like, oh, it's not necessarily about physical strength. It's mental. Right. And it is about literally knowing that you can punch someone through a wall. You don't have to. It's not about that. It's building that confidence in yourself. And I think dealing with the occult, and when you're working with the different elements of the world or universe, whatever you want to call it, I think you have to have that confidence in your abilities and believe in yourself as well. Otherwise, you're just going to fail. And then you're going to ask, why didn't it work? Well, why didn't you believe?
Right.
Does that make any type of sense?
Definitely.
Okay. So
I mean, when you look at magic, it's based on, at the crux of it all, it's based on various systems of belief, and that's really what makes it work.
Yeah, and and I mean, I jokingly said, "Are we going to go bibbity bobbity boo?" But sometimes, in a weird way, yes, I think people can go bibbity bobbity boo. It doesn't mean something's going to poof up right in front of them, but it could empower them. It could give them that confidence to where it's like, okay, I am a magician, I am a sorcerer, I'm a witch, and I do think that a lot of times we also have to find our own. We have to find our own uniqueness. We can't copy, we can't necessarily emulate. We can learn, but we have to find what works for us. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people, they neglect that. They forget about their own uniqueness.
Right. Oh yeah, they do.
And I have to say something, Kurtis. I'm somewhat disappointed in you. I was hoping you'd have the curls out, because everyone should see the Jerry curl going. So,
yeah, I know. I've been brushing it back and putting it up, man. It's crazy. It feels like having snakes on my head. Oh my God, it drives me insane.
Well, actually, I'm kind of happy you mentioned snakes, because you have an interesting connection with dragons. And it seems like you have a whole philosophy around that. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I mentioned earlier my various influences growing up in regard to spirituality. And one thing I noticed, one of the primary common denominators in all of it was the dragon. The dragon has existed within all cultures, all religious paradigms since the beginning of time. There is not a single culture where the dragon has not either been feared or revered. So I understood that this was the common thread that we could all relate to as followers of different traditions. And I started to rely on that to put together my thesis in regard to spirituality and how we could apply it today in order to actually reap practical beneficial results. And a lot of that dealt with simply shifting the human perception, you see, because within this day and age, there's a lot of social engineering that pretty much programs us to be for or against specific groups of people. Voting, instead of being done through a process of critical thinking, it's also a familial, cultural type of act where people, it's like the church. If you're in a Catholic neighborhood, you're most likely going to end up being Catholic. Well, that's not serving the greater good of humanity, right? These differences, They are a means through which we can learn from each other. But this draconian force also represents the reptilian brainstem that we all have. So it's not just an external symbol, which exists within all religions and spiritual paths, but it's also a basic truth that exists within all of us. And again, we have to bring up hermetics, as within, so without. These external principles started having me to contemplate myself and my own forces of light and darkness. And I came to the understanding that if I shunned one for the other, I was only going to be half a man. And I was pretty much choosing to hate myself no matter which side I chose. And then I started to relate that outward, and I started to see how people act within the world, and how some white people can be intimidated and scared of Black Americans and vice versa. And I started to understand that we are all scales on the body of the one dragon. So whenever a light is shined, a shadow is cast. These things are not mutually exclusive. They are mutually dependent. They are aspects of the totality, the whole. That is the dragon. And this really formed the foundation of the alchemical praxis, of what was the draconian arcanum. It still is the draconian mysteries, but now it is the soul science. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, what is soul science, aside from, like soul, brother? What is soul science?
Yeah, soul science, man, it is essentially, I've spent a lot of time within all of these lodges, spiritual traditions, absorbing what is useful, rejecting what is useless, adding what is specifically my own. That's Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do philosophy. And I come to understand that in order to truly benefit people, I had to drop the dogma. I had to drop the styles. I had to drop the systems. I needed to show people these alchemical principles beyond the dogma of angels, demons, religions, doctrines, ideologies, and just give them the brass tacks of what works so that they can make positive change in themselves and in their life. That's what the soul science is. It drops the religious dross, the dross of the politics that exists within magical lodges, the silly arguments between witches and these online witch wars. I mean, it's pretty pathetic. That's not me. I'm an alchemist. I'm not even in their field. I don't do the same thing. I'm not competition. This is really about just doing that, though, empowering humanity. And because it is stripped down beyond all religions and doctrines and ideologies, anybody can check it out and benefit. It doesn't matter. You can be a Christian. You can be a Luciferian. You can be a Thelemite. You can be a Catholic. It's just listening to ideas, spiritual ideas. How do we better the world, and ourselves?
It almost, to me, reminds me of going back to nothingness and being a blank slate and absorbing without necessarily taking in all the nonsense. You don't need it's going to sound terrible, but you don't need a Moses to suddenly pop up and say, I'm the one who's going to guide you to wherever, the Holy Land, and you need to listen to me and blah blah blah. I think it's what do you feel works for you? What speaks to you? And going back to that blank slate, that nothingness, it can work because you get rid of all that outside influence and you're able to focus on yourself and what works for you.
Yeah, definitely. And believe it or not, what I often encourage people do is focus on the traditions of their ancestors, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I really think that helps.
Well,
at least to start, because we all have specific potentials within our genetic code.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's in the bloodline.
Yeah, we have genetic predispositions. So the traditions of our ancestors are linked to our genetic code. It only makes sense. So I often, I encourage people to take that advice before even the advice of interest, because, ego can dictate my spiritual interests. If I'm a Sicilian, hypothetically, I'm not. Not saying this is always the case, but maybe it is ego that forces me to be interested in Haitian voodoo. Maybe. I think we should be comfortable in our own skin, be comfortable with who we are, explore our ancestors, and then when we can connect to spiritual planes, connect to spiritual truths, connect to this state of gnosis is what I like to call it. It's like this niche where you don't need a pastor, you don't need a guru, but the spirits themselves, they just start teaching you. Then you can start to expand your horizons and study different traditions. That's at least the way I did it. That is not gospel truth. That's just my own experience, right? And it works for me, and I'm still learning. I'm still a beginner in something at all times.
Yeah, I think no matter what, it's always going to be something that we don't know how to do, that we can learn how to do it, or Kurtis, you're breaking my rule here. No smoking on stream.
Sorry, sir.
I tell that to Bonnie, I'm telling it to you. But I do think, we have the capability to learn any and everything. Not everything will come second nature. Not everything will be easy, but we can learn, and especially if we push ourselves and we do have that interest and that drive. And going back to what you said about the ancestors, and this is coming from me as a Black American, and we all know what happened, slavery, blah blah blah. But how does one such as myself find what their ancestors practice? That's difficult. And of course, the first thing that pops in my mind is it would be voodoo, because chances are my ancestry comes from West Africa. But, there's always that chance, like, well, what if it didn't? What if they came from Ethiopia? They weren't doing voodoo over there. So what about the people who can't find their ancestry, or they don't know about it?
Well, at that point in time, man, it's really the nucleus of all students. When they come to me, the first thing I teach them is to reach this state of no mind. Draconian consciousness is what I've coined it. It's this state of gnosis. You see, a lot of people will focus on traditions and ideologies too much. They can be helpful. Sticking to something that your ancestors were involved in, it will create success. But if you don't know what that is, simply meditate. You know, that's really at the crux of it all. To be able to reach a state of trance, to communicate with the divine, no matter what you might consider that to be, it is very important. And that is done through meditation, regular meditation. It has to be a discipline. There's times now where I catch myself meditating at the most odd times. Just because you do it for so long, you tend to not need to sit in a chair in an Egyptian death posture or in a lotus position.
Wait, I'm sorry.
You can wash the
Egyptian
dishes
death
and zone
posture?
out.
Wait a second. What is the Egyptian death posture? I have not heard that one.
When you look on hieroglyphs, it's basically the pharaohs sitting with their back straight in a chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm thinking it's like you got
It's
a
some
knife to your throat or
fancy
something.
term. I think it was coined or dubbed by Austin Osman Spare and his system of sigil magic.
Okay.
Yeah, if I remember correctly.
All right, I'm gonna have to look into that
I'd be
one.
wrong.
That caught my interest right away. Egyptian death posture.
Yeah.
That sounds like torture. Now you mentioned alchemy. That's your field, and you know when I hear alchemy, I think of the mixing or blending of two elements that certainly don't belong together, that create something new. And I mean, I guess in a way, if we look at it from an energetic point of view, we possibly could have that happen to where two different energies can create a new force. But what exactly is alchemy?
Well, there's two schools of thought. There's the physical alchemical turning lead to gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the idea behind what you're talking about. A lot of people say that's just allegory. A lot of people say that it is more about spiritual transmutation, leading to transfiguration, turning the lead or the dross of self into something more gold or more divine. I'm of this school of thought, this rare school of thought that states that both are true because, you know, things like spagyrics and extracting monoatomic minerals, creating alchemical stones, this is all important because they represent spiritual processes that occur within us as we do these experiments. Again, we have to look at hermetics, as within, so without. So if we succeed at creating a plant stone, we have also succeeded in transmuting or transforming self in some sort of way through that process. So alchemy really is both the transmutation of prima materia to work according to one's own will, mm-hmm. by creating, for instance, tinctures, elixirs, and finding the philosopher's stone, which I have done a lot of work on that as well, and I've made a lot of headway in regard to what that is alchemically through my work with Lucifer. Alchemy is complex, man. It is the science of spirituality. This is what gets us beyond religion and into practical transformation. Okay, where does our spirituality get us? What do we do with it? This is what alchemical transformation leads to. An understanding of what to do with this power, because it's very practical.
Let's go back real quick. The Philosopher's Stone. Okay, so in popular culture, people have heard of it, but they may not exactly know what it is. What is the Philosopher's Stone?
Well, according to lore, the Philosopher's Stone was essentially a means to immortality. It was a means to transmute the dross of human flesh into something that was more divine. It was profane through, snake oil salesmen, scam artists, where, people would do chemistry in order to make this illusion of creating gold from something else. Mm-hmm. And so they would rip off kings and queens and run off and escape with all this money, right? That's not really what we're talking about here. The true Philosopher's Stone is the crux of all alchemy. It is the elixir of immortality. Yeah.
Immortality. Is that something that you would want? Immortality.
I think we have to wonder what immortality is.
Yeah, well, what is it to you?
I don't consider it. I mean, let's face it. We are immortal anyway. Energy does not die. Right? We know that this human body, this meat suit, is not going to last forever. Scientific law states this. I mean, brakes don't get better. Chrome doesn't get shinier on our cars. Shit breaks down. But beyond this flesh, can I maintain will to evolve and stay on my path? Can I keep track of who I am through knowledge of self? Can I transmute my consciousness to leave this meat suit and continue to evolve as I want to? I think that's immortality. And I think that's really what the Philosopher's Stone does. It crystallizes and substantiates the human consciousness. So we become more divine within this earth plane, which means that when we pass from this body, we're not just some shade, some ghost. We are something that is more divine. We have a little bit more control over what happens next. So we can begin to mold and shape our next life experience so that we can perfect ourselves even more. This is all hypothetical. I'm starting to link into other shit right now. This is definitely how it occurs. It's really just experience. And without that alchemical work, right, on this plane, what happens is you leave this earth plane and you go through this recycling process completely unaware.
You know, you're not the first person I heard say something like that, which is very interesting. For me, and you guys, I'm about to share a little something I normally keep to myself, but for me, I'm a believer in immortality in a not only a physical sense, but a spiritual one as well. Like you said, we're energy. We never truly leave. But in the physical sense, I don't mean you're going to live to be thousands of years old or nothing like that. But the idea that you put out, you being remembered, you become immortal. And I think that's what that's what I want anyway. I want to be remembered in some way because I'm a storyteller and I love telling stories. And for me, if I do something right and my stories are remembered, that makes me immortal. And that gives me all the more power in the world. I will become a god. But in all seriousness, though, like for me, that's remembrance and having something of you left behind that will never go away. That's immortality for me.
Definitely.
Yeah, but it's just crazy because then we could get into like, what is a soul? What is a spirit? And I am not going down that route. Jesus Christ, that's a headache. But the route I will go down is recently you were on a Ouija board with Miss Bonnie, our Texas witch, and Mr. Richard Ramirez came through, and I know in one of the videos you said that you weren't necessarily too into the spirit boards per se, and having that type of experience, I'm assuming it somewhat changed your mind on how they work. But what made you decide to get on a board, and do you use any other type of divination tools?
Yeah, well, when I was a kid, my grandmother would spend hours on the Ouija board by herself. And who knows what she was talking to, but whatever she was talking to definitely had a grasp on reality and was beyond time and space. I mean, it would predict things accurately, things that I cannot deny had to be spiritual sourced, you know?
Mm-hmm.
This ain't coming from her subconscious. But as a result, I started to want to get involved with the Ouija boards. And I did, to no good results. The planchette would not move when I put my hands on it, you know. And when I worked it with somebody, what would happen would be an infinity pattern normally, or random, seem to be like sigillic patterns on the board. I'm like, okay, just not my thing, not my cup of tea. So I was always skeptical. I thought it had to do with the subconscious mind, and it was probably some sort of kink in my subconscious wiring, right? But I was here in Texas, in Amarillo at the time, and I was hanging out with some friends from the Panhandle Pagan Community Alliance, and we were all working on the Ouija board, and for sure, same thing always happens. I jump on, no connection, just figure eight patterns, weird shit. Then all of a sudden, two other friends jump on, and they find out that there's spirits that are attached to me. And that these spirits were trying to come through the board and, you know, influence people other than myself. I went through this process of exorcism and just decided to put them down. I didn't want to touch them ever again. There was no use for me to touch a Ouija board. However, when someone comes to me and they say, hey, I think I know how we can get this thing to work for you. You know, let's blindfold you, put in some earplugs, put on a gas mask so that we shut off most of your senses as best as we can. Get yourself out of the way, and then just let the thing work. And that's how it happened. It just so happened that, you know, the second time we did this, we decided it would be Richard Ramirez. Yeah.
I know that was mostly Bonnie's idea. It just, like, you better watch out, man. Like, I have to sleep with an eye open with women who watch all those killer shows and stuff. They know how to get away with it. So,
Right.
But that was very interesting watching that. It was because it you know, being that your senses are cut off, it forces something else to open up and take over. And do you think that you're susceptible when you do that? Because, you know, you do have an understanding that most people, I would say, don't have an understanding of the universe and just how things work, whether it's learned or just coming natural to you. Like, do you think you're susceptible to these influences and can possibly be controlled?
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt, you're susceptible. You're open. This is where learning to reverse engineer your empathy to understand what your energy signature feels like. It's important because it ensures that any foreign energy signature you know is not yours. You can set up, well, you can draw a line in the sand in regard to how far they can come into your personal auric space, how far they can influence you. Without that knowledge, it becomes very dangerous. You know, the emotions of the spirit, all of a sudden, they start to bleed over into your psyche. So the tension of being scared all of a sudden could become the tension of being violent, the tension of all of a sudden having a psychological breakdown. And you think, oh, this kid was on drugs, something came through the Ouija board, killed somebody. A lot of times, man, it's the limits in our own psyche that break. If we are a conduit that can only, for instance, run 200 volts, if we jump on a Ouija board and we're exposed to 2,000 volts, it's going to fry the sympathetic and or parasympathetic nervous system. It's going to cause issues. Is this a demonic curse? Or is it ill health that comes from self-imposed energy blockages? You know, these are the sorts of questions, and I'm an alchemist, a scientist. So these are the sorts of questions I have when I get on a Ouija board. So I still have this element of skepticism, but I know that we've managed to somehow get myself out of the way to now it's working better.
Yeah.
Why? You know, that's what I want to find out.
Yeah, you let me know if you ever do, but unfortunately, I don't know if it's really possible to ever find out why, because we don't really know how these things work to begin with. You know, what is this portal that we're somehow opening up? Not, well, yeah, with a piece of cardboard or something, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to get to the bottom of that. And like, what if, and this is me going into my weird little science fiction mind, but what if we are in some ways capable of opening portals to whatever dimension they're from or we go to in the afterlife, and we just don't know it, and we need some type of tool that helps bring it out, whether it be a spirit board or a pendulum, dowsing rods. What if that is the case? Because I do know the human body lets off a electromagnetic field. You know, we all produce that. It's just very, very, very weak. But what if somehow we're able to concentrate it into this little object, and somehow we increase the power of it, and it creates this portal, whether it be permanently or temporarily?
Well, it's not only possible, I mean, it's pretty natural. Again, there's this draconian consciousness. It's no mind. What is no mind? It's a collective mind. It's all thoughts. We're all scales on the body of the one dragon. So when I'm connecting to something through a Ouija board, someone through a Ouija board, I'm really just collecting information from this natural connection that I already have to this consciousness that seems separate from myself. That separation is an illusion, though. Just like our separation, we know that at the molecular level, there is no distance between you and I. All things are one at the molecular level. Alchemy is chemistry. Spirituality is science. It's not really hard to understand that these things are reflections of one another, you know? Mm-hmm. So, are we contacting a spirit through the Ouija board, or are we cutting off everything else so that we can hear that one aspect of all that is? Well, it's something to contemplate, and it's something that I've been contemplating lately.
It is. And well, we could use you as an example, going back to you being blindfolded, wearing the gas mask, the earplugs, to cut out all that outside influence and your own mind. So maybe we are hearing what's already here, but it's just so much other noise blocking it.
Yeah. I mean, back when I was working with the ancient Persian dark gods, I was told that the advice humanity needed to hear was that if they wanted to see beyond this physical plane, if they wanted to see beyond the veil, they had to first learn to not see the reality that was in front of them. To shut this off. My perception of this has to be trained to get shut off. And so the spirit gave me this exercise where I was told to put a sugar cube in a glass of water and stir it. Spirits whispering in my ear, observe the sugar dissolve. Watch the particulate swirl around. Keep stirring until there is nothing left. Then I repeated this with my reality, right? I sit here, and now within an instant, I can focus on my breath and simply begin to watch this reality separate. And with open eyes, I can see utter darkness. And I can call upon any spiritual force that I want, and it will meet me in this utter darkness between worlds. You know? We just have
Kurtis,
to train ourselves to do it.
Things deeply.
That's it. It's just a matter of practical doing. It's kind of like doing push-ups. Push-ups are hard at first till you start doing them. When you put forth the effort, though, decide that you're going to do 100 push-ups a day for 30 days, you're going to see some pretty dope results. Same thing here. Put forth that kind of effort, you get that kind of result. So it's not all boogity boogity. It's tinkle, 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 poof, wish granted. No, it's work. You know, but it's worth it.
Oops.
It's more entertaining than going to church and giving your money away.
Well, I definitely don't disagree with that, but you have to go to black church, clearly. You know, speaking of church, you know as well as I do, of course, I'm talking about the Christian churches mostly. They usually will speak about angels and demons. And I think it was last month. Yeah, it was last month. What am I talking? It's no think. Last month when I had Mr. Malice on and Richard Layell, quick little talk about angels came up and everything. And I remember in chat you said that angels, demons, same thing, which I agree with you. I think they are the same beings. The Watchers were angels who, I don't know, I guess they got fed up with taking orders, or they didn't like how things were, ripped their wings off, changed their names, whatever. But why do you, I didn't mean to put my little 2 cents in there, but why do you say that angels and demons are the same type of beings or the same beings?
Well, it's because of my understanding of divinity, which is the dragon. When people say God, I think of the dragon. When people say goddess, I think of the dragon. The dragon to me is divinity. I don't use the term God or goddess. It transcends gender. It transcends black and white. It transcends good and evil, light and darkness. So, for that reason, angels and demons are like wings on the body of the dragon. The dragon needs both wings to soar. If it only has one wing, it's going to spin around, fall. There's 72 demons of the Goetia, the Goetia. There's 72 angels of the Shemhem Farash. These are like polarities on a battery, right? Mm-hmm. The angel and the demon, they seem to be opposing forces, but they're not. They are polarities on the same daemonic force, daemon, meaning spirit, which is helpful for the evolution of mankind, a messenger of the divine. They are both that. They work according to different means. Demons tend to be movers and shakers within the world. Celestial spirits, angels, they tend to be more concerned with our spiritual evolution and ascent. But they are the same race of spirits. Kind of like, okay, we can look at the Tengu of Japan. They were crow demons. Mm-hmm. We can look at Malthus within the Goetia, within the Goetia. He's a crow demon. Is it the same race? We can assume so. They are not at war. We have to get beyond duality. Duality is old. It's outdated. People want to be concerned with these issues of supposed prejudice within the world. We need to look at religion and this idea of duality and understand that it's all a part of social engineering. You shun either angels or demons, you are shunning a part of yourself. They are all the same race. How do I know this? Because it is reflected within our spiritual selves, as well as our biology. There's 72,000 sand-like particles at the perineum. Every 1,000 of those sand-like particles equals one of the 72 jinn. There's 72,000 sand-like crystalline particles around the pineal gland. Each 1,000 of those sand-like particles equals one of the 72 angels of the Shemhem Farash. When you add 72,000 and 72,000, what do you get? The 144,000 within the book of Revelation as spoken of within the Bible. This is how I know. Because I've made the connection. And it's not something that can be taught, right? It's just something we come to know. This is the state of gnosis. I can try to teach it, but it's very hard. Very complex.
Now, I'm going to actually borrow something from voodoo here, and I'm going to say that it somewhat reminds me of the Lua and how the two biggest families, the Rada and the Petu, the Rada are considered cool and the Petu are considered hot, meaning that the Petu are a bit more hands-on
volatile
and aggressive, and the Rada are a bit more laid back and, calmer. And that's how I kind of view the angel and demon thing. They're the same. The Loa are our human ancestors, and I consider them the same because they are. So angels, demons, I look at them as the same, just different ways of doing things. And like we said earlier, sometimes your way isn't going to work for me. It's not my way.
Right.
And seeing it both sides and understanding that, you can create a new way of doing something that works for you. Or, sometimes you just...
Well, is it new? Like, well, I mean, we can look at the Lua and understand that they are pretty much elevated human beings, right?
Yeah.
The Afro-Brazilian tradition of Kimbanda, the Eshu and Pombagira, they are the same. Pretty much human beings that were made divine, elevated. Yeah. We need to take this truth, because this is something that tends to be true in most ancient cults, is the deification of the ancestors. And we need to understand that it exists within Christianity as well. And it's right there in the Bible. And people within the satanic praxis refuse to see it too. I mean, let's use Lilith as an example. She's considered to be a dark goddess, the mother of all demons. But she was the first human woman. She was the first human woman, the first wife of Adam. She was a human being. Nema, queen of the black earth, same thing. Dark goddess. Demonic queen. They also forget that, ironically, she was the wife of Noah. In the Bible, the brother to Nema was Tubal-Cain.
Wait, I gotta stop you real quick.
Hold on. In which lore, Belial is sister to Nema, so that means Belial is Tubal-Cain. These are all human beings. Yeah, we think we are calling on fallen angels. We're calling on the ghosts of the Nephilim.
Did someone walk by a second ago?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just saw a shadow and it freaked me right out. So, okay. That's all. That's all I needed to know.
Yeah, I didn't want to lose my train of thought because he was walking past.
Okay, so you knew where I was going with that. But yeah, no, that is something to think about. And unfortunately, and I somewhat talk about this, usually people, they take it the wrong way when I say that, oh no, I am my own creator. I am my own divine being. I believe that we can become elevated. We are elevated. We're just living a physical life for whatever reason. It's different for everyone. And we forget that because, unfortunately, we get caught up in the concept, and this is definitely a human concept in my mind, of good versus evil. And if it doesn't fit this category, it must be evil, or if it fits this category, it must be good. And I think we get caught up in that, and it warps our minds, and we lose ourselves, we lose our potential, and we don't live true. And I think that's one of the worst things that can happen. And I like using this as an example for people just to get them to think a little bit. Like, let's say there is a tribe somewhere, some indigenous tribe, and it's a volcano on their island, and it's going to erupt. Well, they say, okay, we have to appease the volcano god, and we need to sacrifice a virgin or whatever. So, Mary Lou, your time is up. And they throw her in there and they kill her. Does that make them evil? Or does that make them good? Because in their mind, they're doing a good thing so they can save the island, save everyone to appease the volcano god. But is it a bad thing that they're doing, but for good reasons? Does that make them evil? I don't think it does. It's questionable, of course, because we come from a different society and we look at that and it's like, no, the volcanoes erupted because of this. But, and I think when we put it that way, it gets people thinking like, oh, well, what are the actions behind someone who is considered evil? What are the actions behind someone that's considered good? What makes them good? Adolf Hitler. What?
Well, this is the ironic thing.
What the heck?
Is that even the most evil, wicked motherfucker, a lot of times, in his own mind, he's doing things for the greater good.
Yeah, so this is
it's
so
all about perspective.
weird.
I mean, let's look at...
I have to cut you off real quick.
The Walking Dead, look at Negan. Right?
I hold up. I got to kick somebody. Like, that is crazy we're talking about this. And freaking Adolf Hitler shows up. What the heck? You're out. Okay, there we go. Oh, or maybe you're not. How do I ban this guy? This is the first person I've ever had to
Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, I had to get rid of Hitler. That's the first. That is the first. So sorry about that, guys. All right, taken care of. Let's get back to it. All right, now what were you saying? I am so sorry.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what we were talking about.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That
No, it's all right.
That got me. What the heck? But good and evil, and our concept of it, the human concept and creation, and how it limits us in many ways, because and this is probably the best thing the church has ever done to control people and make them think anything you do that's outside of this, outside of what we say is righteous, is evil and bad, and you're going to burn unless you come over here, and this is all good and happy-go-lucky.
Well, there's some people that can work within that paradigm, and they can actually do well, and it makes them a better person. I'm all for that. I hold no judgment towards Christians. What I do hold judgment towards is hypocrites. People who preach, love God, going to heaven, but they're evil, self-serving people,
Mm-hmm.
And that's predominantly what happens within the church these days. There's some great people, though, who are Christian, and I'm happy to associate with people like that. But yeah, the extremism, it exists within not just Christianity, but come on, man. You definitely have to look at Islam. It's within all Abrahamic faiths.
Yeah, that's what I was mostly getting at.
All
Abrahamic,
Judaic, Abrahamic faiths, for sure. And this is the interesting thing, is that even the Bible states that the enemy will rule the church at the end of days, and everybody's preaching it's the end of days, and they're all going to church saying their church is the way. The Bible says there's only 144,000 of them that are going to make it to heaven, but they all think they're going to make it to heaven. I mean, we have to really look at this doctrine. Don't these people know what they're reading? They need to know what they're believing in. you know,
Yeah.
and they don't. That's the sad thing. Is this extremism is brought forth into the world and acted, imposed upon the world through a bunch of people that honestly don't know what they believe in. That's what's sad.
It really makes you wonder. And I'm gonna switch up to something else. This is gonna be very out of left field. And I notice a lot of occultists and people who work with magic and all that. They don't necessarily like this topic too much, but I don't care.
Mhm.
So, what is your opinion on extraterrestrial life?
Well, to put it simply, I believe that the beings that we call upon as magicians are not necessarily limited to being spirits as they are defined by the masses. I think a lot of times what we're calling upon are different alien races. I mean, when you look at the organization of, for instance, the Goetia, we're looking at entities of various planetary spheres. I think that extraterrestrial beings, angels, demons, they can be considered one and the same. I don't think that these are the same as the UFO green or gray men that were famous in the movies. You know, we're talking about inner and interdimensional beings who don't need spacecrafts to get about. They are not just spiritual, they are biological. Not in the same way that we are on this three-dimensional plane, because they're not limited to three-dimensional bodies, but they are biological. So my belief is that it's all linked. I think what is occurring within an evocation is, in essence, the telepathic communication between oneself and what would be considered an alien intelligence. How do I know? Because I've actually made substantial contact, and a lot of the things that is in my book are rather spiritually scientific. I mean, yeah, it's alien technology.
Now, your book. What is your book, real quick? We didn't get to that. What? Yeah, you're an author. So, how many books did you write? What are they?
Well, Black Magic of Ahriman was my debut. That book actually sold out years ago. It was selling through Amazon, but I think the publisher took it down. I also contributed to the Belial Compendium. It was called Belial Without a Master. Mm-hmm. The Lucifer Compendium, I contributed a text called The Alchemy of Halo and Horn. The Azazel Compendium, Azazel Stealing Fire from the Gods, I wrote a third of that entire compendium. That contribution was called Scapegoat Grimoire of the Forbidden Brothers. That was deep. That started to get into our connection to angels and demons, our evolution, the creation story from the Watcher's side of things. And then I also contributed a couple articles to a book called The Anthology of Gnosis. That's actually available for free online, if anyone can look that up.
How long does it take you to write? And like, what's your process? Does something just kind of strike you the moment, or do you just get bored and you feel like writing, or are you the type where you start off on your own and then next thing you know, it's almost like something takes over you?
No, it starts with the work. It starts with the spirits, really. I start connecting to the spirits, and the work that's put in the text, it's theirs. I try to get myself out of the way. Whenever I get in the way, the work is never good enough. It's never good enough for me. When I allow them to guide the process, what happens is I'll end up, channeling a specific magical ritual. I'll have a recorder going so that I can translate that to text, and then that'll go into a book. But what people don't understand is that unlocks the next level of work. That unlocks the next level of research. So I might have to research a specific language, a specific political era, specific kings, what was their agenda. I have to, all of these different things. So it's not just a matter of sitting down and writing. An occult writer, a true occult writer, when placed under the looking glass, is going to be publishing some very powerful gnosis, sure. But what they're stating should also be backed up and validated by history, as well as science. So it's a difficult field to be in, because there's always someone trying to call you out,
Yeah, too bad you just can't kick them in the balls and be done with it.
You
okay.
can.
Yeah, but consequences to actions.
Yeah, well, it really doesn't bother me. I don't deal with it much, honestly. Yeah, I don't deal with it much.
So we're gonna come close to wrapping it up, and oh my gosh, it's so much we could still go over, but I try to keep it.
Hey, I'll come on again, brother.
Yeah. Let me ask you though, because this was something that again happened on my show with Mr. Malice and Richard Leal, and I mentioned something about a dream I had, and in chat you said the cone of white light or something like that. And this brings me to symbology and dreams. What is the connection there? Do you think we actually do get messages in our dreams? And are we even dreaming? Perhaps we're going to some type of other reality.
Well, we have to look at the origin of lucid dreaming. It was actually the Taoists who first mastered what we would consider dream yoga. Now, lucid dreaming is the act of becoming aware that you are dreaming, conscious within the dream state, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this state, we can literally reprogram the subconscious mind, therefore transforming our behaviors, ridding ourselves of limitations on this earth plane. So what we need to understand is that the Taoists mastered this dream yoga for the sake of becoming more lucid now, not necessarily in the state of the dream. But it's interesting you ask that, because yes, we are getting powerful subconscious messages through the symbolism in our dreams. So any detail you remember, a car, a color of a car, the building you were in, windows, where the window's broken, what kinds of people were present. All of this stuff matters, and it can be looked up as a dream symbol. And these individual symbols can be interpreted like tarot cards. But what we need to understand too is that these same subconscious symbols, when we start learning the subconscious language, they'll operate in our reality too. So, for instance, we have deja vu. We should take note of that. Where am I at? Oh, I'm in the movie theater. Okay, I'm eating popcorn. All right, what do all these things mean as dream symbols? And normally, what you're going to find is that your life experience actually speaks to you and guides you, you know? So, yeah, that symbolism is very important because it helps you to understand the language that your life experience uses to guide you.
Now you're going to get me thinking because I'm not a huge dreamer. Well, I mean, they say we all dream, just don't remember. But now you're going to get me going into the vault of memories here. Okay, so blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So, you know what? We're going to close it out with this. This is going to be a good one for you, too. This path of whether it be somewhere in the occult, alchemy, doing magic, whatever you want to call it, who is this path for?
Is it what?
Who is this path for? The path that you walk in the occult and...
Well, the path that I'm walking is the path of the seeker. So this path is for anyone who's seeking knowledge, seeking truth, seeking modern, applicable spirituality, not just religious tales and mythologies, but, how do we wield the power of those symbols to actually empower ourselves and create change? Or most importantly, how do we get beyond them, understanding them as part of ourselves, and how do we activate them within ourselves to create change? So it's for the seeker, anyone who wants to seek more power and control over themselves, man. The person who wants to control others, the person that wants to just simply obtain everything they want in life and then put spirituality away, it is not for them.
Okay. I think that's a good place to end it. Kurtis, where can people find you if they want to learn under you or maybe follow you on YouTube or something like that? Where can they find you?
Yeah, come to Kurtis Joseph on YouTube. Definitely. My Soul Science podcast is uploaded there about a week after it premieres. Season 1 of Soul Science is available on all major platforms, including Spotify. You can go to kurtisjoseph.com and get information in regard to my apprenticeship programs, my consultation packages, ritual for hire, and things like that. But yeah, definitely come see me on YouTube, like, subscribe, because that content is free and it's practical. You know what I'm saying? This is stuff that you can use and apply. And, we're not always trying to sell you stuff.
Oh, okay. So no unleashing my inner God for this money.
Right.
Kurtis, thank you for coming on. And you guys, all those links are in the description below. So click on them, check them out. Say Melvin sent you over. But yeah, it was awesome. And thank you everyone who joined. Normally I know I say hi to everyone in chat, but this was a deep one, so couldn't do that this time. But thank you all for showing up. And also, guys, remember to follow Unexplained Possibilities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram. Those links are also in the description below. So with that said, remember, guys, there are things that go bump in the night. Go ahead and tell them bye. Or hi. Oh, wow, I messed up my own outro. Well, editing. Bye, everybody.